And welcome back to another edition of the Best Three podcast. I am here with Torrey Hawkins once again. TH, how we doing?
Doing good, Alvin. Good morning. It's an
It's
early
a
morning today, and I
it is
know
early.
it's usually we're on the late night on the night train. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it's good to be on this early AM. I got my coffee in hand, and you know what I mean. We'll see what we can do.
I'm fully caffeinated on this end, so I've already switched over to water. But it's the Australian Open just wrapped up, so this kind of leaves us in a bit of a weird I call it at home jet lag. I've been
Exactly.
getting up pretty early.
Yeah.
Sometimes earlier than I want to, and now it's somewhat automatic. There's no tennis to be watched, but my body is ready to consume.
Right.
But
Right.
that's a good time for us to chat then, I think.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Been some great tennis, man. Been some great tennis. I know we want to speak a little bit about Madison Keys, and I thought
Oh yeah, we do.
so proud of her, man. I recall, and I know you had mentioned your I'm gonna say fandom slash hope that she had done well. And I remember saying in a previous episode that if there was anybody that could go toe to toe and actually out hit or strike, it was Madison Keys. And I was looking forward to that matchup. I was curious how she'd match up to Iga, but I was not at all Madison playing her best. I was not at all surprised. And I was pleasantly surprised that she brought even more, I feel, serve plus one against Arena. And let me just say this at the outset. Tennis needed that. Tennis needed Madison, top, we're going to say top two player in the world from, what was it, 2017? When she got to the final against
US Open 2017, yep.
Right? Tennis needed, Arena needs her counter, her bizarro, so to speak, in these days, because only then do you really get tested and really round out your game. If she's just constantly working on attacking, hitting through players, you kind of need that. I go back to the Serena days when she had Capriati that could handle her pace. She had Lindsay Davenport that could handle her pace. These players, while they were not necessarily as offensive as she was in everything, they made Serena play counter punish, which really helped define her game. She could go through anybody else. She couldn't go through Lindsay. She couldn't just blow through Sharapova. She had to strike and go toe to toe, and those are some epic battles. So Arena needs a Madison Keys. She needs these players to come through and be ready to go and battle her, not just and wait for her to be patient and pick her spots. No, if you don't bring a girlfriend, I will. And that's what I, on a personal coach's note, felt like long term, that's a great win for Maddie, but a great win for women's tennis. Arena will actually improve as a result. Of course, Madison's now in the conversation, as she always should have been. Hats off to her and Bjorn and the rest of her team, her parents, everybody for the belief in her. But I want you to tag in. But I was so, on a bigger scale, very, very happy to see that for tennis in general.
Yeah, and I think, for tennis in general, especially let's start with the American market that we're in, right? We like to see the same people kind of show up in the later rounds of the big tournaments that we're watching on TV. And so Madison's kind of been in the zeitgeist for a while now. I think people know her. Tennis fans definitely know her. But it's, Arena has had Iga for the last 2 years, and what they've been doing in the 1-2 kind of battle has been fantastic. It's good for the greater sport to have, not only Arena and Iga with very contrasting game styles, you would say,
Right.
but now you have like this, kind of Thor meets Hulk, like a
Right.
different version of
Sure.
big tennis. And I mean, my it's less a fandom I have of Madison. It's more of a kinship. I feel like she's my long lost little sister that I never
Yeah.
had for no
Yeah.
reason
Yeah.
whatsoever. But I feel like when I say that, it's echoed within the tennis community, right? You saw the outpouring of support and congratulations that seemed to come from a very earnest place from players, coaches, commentators, like people at the
100%.
USTA. Like Madison's just that kind of person that
100%.
makes people want to pull for her, because
Sure.
I think she comes by it honestly, and I feel like she really wants you to be a part of her journey, and she wears it on her sleeve. And I shed tears during the final,
Mm,
but not only in the final, but also in the semi. Like the semi against Iga was a hell of a match, man.
it was.
It was
It
a hell of a
was.
match. It
And
had
Edith
some.
threw everything at it, from the
She
bathroom
did.
breaks to the to a little bit of gamesmanship. I mean, to just all out grit and fight, which to me made it even more worth it for Maddie. I'm going to say one more thing, which I think we as Americans tend to do more than anything else, which I don't like. We write people off too soon, Alvin. And I feel like, let's face it, a lot of us had written off Madison Keys. A lot of us had written off, her and her level. We kind of, we push things off. And I'm not here to speak to the likes of your Emma Raducanos, who's been through, multiple coaching changes and had kind of a Cinderella story at the Open some years back. I don't know if she'll ever make it back to a final, to be very honest with you, just in terms of where the game's going and how, I'm going to say, how perfect that situation was for her that year. I'm talking about a legit player, lost in a final against another very good American player. And in our drive through, here today, gone tomorrow kind of mentality, I feel like, it was almost more of we kind of moved on, past Madison. And I feel like the girl's still playing. She's not even 30 years old yet. You know what I mean?
Has
She,
been in the top 25. Like she's been
right.
around. She's not
And
gone anywhere.
resurgent as she was, I was like, you know what? Madison have a good tournament. I mean, she's not playing bad tennis. And I just feel like, while I'm thinking about it, I think Sloane still has one more tournament up her sleeve at the very least. If she recommits back to her fitness and gets back with some of the teams that have had her playing her best tennis, she clearly can strike with the best of them. I just and to that end, I won't go outside of the American players, but clearly I got to make a head nod to Naomi Osaka. But there's so many of these players that if they brought their A game back, could easily be back inside the top 5. And I say that for Madison in particular because she's just showed it. But I say it more from a standpoint of Americans. I feel like we've got to just give these players the space they need to kind of get their head around. She made a quote that she finally was okay with not winning one.
Right. Yeah.
And that allowed her to win one. It was like this whole burden. And we don't realize, the huge millstone that's around these players' necks about making this and being considered one of the greats. You got to win one. And how that just man, it brings you down. You can't swim with a millstone around your neck, right? So I feel like, to some degree, without getting off topic, I think Coco's still she's trying too hard to win another one, right? To support her, to support who she is, instead of saying, you know what, I'm just going to keep working on my tennis and the next one will come. I was so happy to win one. It was great. But to be honest with you, I got a lot to work on. Let me just keep working on my game. The results take care of themselves. And that mentality, I feel like, is really what has propelled, along with some few minor game changes and serve improvements, has really helped Madison. So hats off to her, man. Hats off to her team. Really proud of Bjorn taking full credit.
A lot of it. I mean, they were shoveling it at him. I mean, it's
Man,
you can only.
which I didn't like that part either. I
It
feel
was
like
a
a
bit
lot of it
much. It was a bit much.
But I feel like I was very, very excited to see Madison just believe in herself and get through. And as I said, man, she looked good, bro. She looked good. Even the second that, when Arena won, Arena made some nice adjustments, but I'm telling you,
She really did.
I was really happy to see that side of Arena, and the fact that she hasn't played a player like that all tournament. You know what I mean? That could actually be what she is. And so to defend that, you could tell, Alvin, those first 3 or 4 service games, she was shell shocked. Like, whoa, where did this come from? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's she played against Clara Towson, I think maybe second or third round, who hits a pretty big ball. Obviously, nothing as big as, I mean, no one hits it bigger than Madison Keys does, right? But Clara does hit a really big ball. But I mean, if you go back to last year's U.S. Open semifinal, right, like where Arena was down, I guess Madison was up a set 6-0, maybe 4-1, something like that, 6-0, 3-1, something like that. So like Madison has put Arena on her heels before. Now the mental and kind of baggage of not getting through that match when she probably should have is one thing, but like as far as the tennis, what's happening on the court, like I think both players go into that match, go into that final knowing exactly what was possible because they've seen it, 4 months ago, right? Arena was very well prepared for what could happen. But I mean, the best case scenario for Madison did happen. Like she didn't miss a ball for the first 30 minutes of that match.
100%, and had good margin, was coming forward. I mean, I'm just going to say, Arena kept waiting for the storm to pass.
Yeah. Because there's always a drop, right?
It was Hurricane Harvey, and it camped for 5 days. I mean, it
Yeah.
was just, buddy, settle in.
Yeah, and it was a that match. So I guess we'll focus on the final here. That match was tactically it had kind of everything, and I love the fact that both players were able to make adjustments. Like Madison came in with a very clear game plan, executed early, got control of the match. Arena showed her championship medal, stayed calm, made some adjustments, wasn't looking at the box a lot. She was like, I know what I need to do. I just need a chance to do it. And eventually this player will come down, right? The jet fuel will burn off after takeoff a little bit. And you just got to be there and be ready. And she's an experienced champion. She knows that, right? So when the opportunity was presented itself in the back end of the first, beginning of the second, like Arena was right there for it. And I think like her making those adjustments, using the drop shot, she served a lot better in the second set, right?
Served better in the drop shot. I think the drop shot use for her is going to be a big tool going forward. She's got pretty good craft, got pretty good skill. I was really, really impressed with her use of that. I don't think Madison saw that coming. Nor do I think she's as swift. I mean, she's 6 feet tall to be able to run that kind of ball down. I think and how often are you going to drop shot Madison Keys? You don't get chances to.
You need time to set up a well-executed drop shot.
The 6 times she had a chance, she had drop shots on all 6. I mean, it wasn't like 16, and it definitely wasn't 16. You know what I mean? So I thought that was a well-played shot, just showing some versatility and just changing it up, making that person move in a little bit more to cheat in on the drop and sneaking them on the next couple. I think drop shot is one of those plays, and you do it well, a la she did, and a la Alcaraz. It just keeps you on your toes, like, oh, gotta watch out for that ball. And when you cheat in a little bit, you become more vulnerable to the depth. And when you stay back too far, right, the dropper's coming. It's just one of those checks and balances, especially in a high tempo battle between two players, two titans, so to speak, that hit the cover off the ball. So it was, again, good to see. It was good to see her change up, and it was so good to see Madison continue to hold serve. You mentioned not many people hit as big as, but I don't think anyone hits it bigger than Madison as far as actual ball speed.
Yeah.
And I think that needs to be said, because when you're now talking about, you're not going to affect Madison's ball speed. What you could affect is how you parry and how you defend and absorb and redirect. But Arena's game is to hit through, right? That's her style. If anything, I feel has better punish behind her big ball. And I feel like that's also something that I've been waiting for Madison to accomplish is, where is her finish? Where is in coaching world, I look at a player who has an aggressive baseline game. I know they got a big serve. I know they got a good +1. I know they got the ability to step up forehand. But if that ball comes back, are they comfortable around the net? Are they comfortable taking the second step up or the swing and volley? Are they comfortable finishing what they started? Because it's the dunk of a nice play or a nice alley-oop. It is I know how to set it up, and I can finish, and then that alone puts its own pressure on you for points to come. It isn't just the shot. It's what it means. It's the momentum it delivers.
Right. And I think that's kind of the, with all the praise that was heaped upon Coach Bjorn, that's not his job to be looking around the corner. And, Bjorn was a hell of a player in his own right. And I think that is probably enough for him to be able to see he's obviously seeing something clearly, and he knows his player. That's, obviously very important for a coach. But at age 29, you got to be thinking about, okay, how much runway do we have left, right? Probably, let's say she's healthy, another 3 years, maybe 4, maybe probably 3. But let's just talk about the next 6 months, right? What's next on the plate for development, because development never stops, right? And I think that's the part of her game that is addressable, right? You can't really do much about how well she moves to a doubles alley, right? She's a power player, but I think there is her midcourt game and her finishing game at the net do leave a lot to be desired, right? As big as she hits it, even in the middle of the serve in no man's land, that next ball, if it's not a high forehand, at the service box, that kind of transition ball is shaky, and I think players will adjust. So like you said, like if she's hitting that big ball, if someone can check it with quick hands and redirect. Like, she's got to be there for that next ball. Got to be there for that next ball.
It's every aggressive baseliner's Achilles heel. It just is. And when it comes back, it's tough. It doesn't often come back.
It doesn't come back. Right?
And so that's part of the problem, right? You don't see it come back as often, and done well, you shouldn't see it come back. But doesn't mean that it won't. I think, I won't go into Zverev and my main man Sinner, too early. But that was another piece of that match. I felt like when that ball comes back, you start to kind of see, that they just don't see that come back that often. So hats off to her. This is a weird thought. I would love to see Madison play a little bit more doubles. I don't care if it's with Coco. I don't care if it's with Sloane. I don't care if it's whoever she can. She has a bevy of players to pick from. JPEG, right? Somebody. Love to see her and Jessica Gould. That's my personal choice.
That would be fun. Maybe Charleston. They're both playing. That'd be
now,
cool.
And here's why I say it. Players are getting a little old. Players are getting up that level. The serve and the return, I don't think anybody serves and returns perhaps better than those two on the American side of things. You arguably could put Coco in that mix and a few others. But as far as on the older side of the players, that generation, I would love to see the two of them extend their career a little bit. Frantangelo's found a way to extend his career with a lot of doubles, not quite as high in singles as the American population would have hoped, but his doubles has gotten really good and did a nice job. And I would love to see, personally, him work that side with her, extend her career a little bit. I think doubles is a bit of a loss. This is a weird tangent I'm going to go here.
Please go.
A lot of the players are unknown. And so therefore, you don't follow the doubles as much because you don't know who they are. In my days growing up, Alvin, we had a guy by the name of John McEnroe, which everybody may or may not have heard of. But you didn't necessarily have to know who Peter Fleming was. You just knew that he was John's partner. You come up through those next few years, and there was a guy by the name of Ken Flack. And you didn't necessarily, you heard about Ken and his younger brother Doug, but man, Flack and Seguso were fun to watch in doubles. And then we had these two guys by the name of the Jensen brothers, and so on and so on. And then we had these two guys named the Bryans, who happened to be twins. And it was just, well, what am I getting at? They were identifiable. And you started watching doubles because you knew they were. The women's side were very similar. Martina and Pam. Who didn't want to watch Martina and Pam out there on the court? And you knew how lefty-righty and tall one and a little shorter one, and one had the great hands, one had the big serve. It was just fun doubles to watch. So I say that to say, sometimes I was just watching some of the doubles final. It's just, there's no offense on any of the good double specialists that are out there, but you just don't know. And I feel like there's a bit of a loss. I bet you in the Olympics, when Nadal played with Alcaraz, I bet there was more viewership in that match when they played.
Oh, yeah.
Was it Ron?
At the Olympics.
Who did Ron play with? Was it Bill? Who did he play doubles with? Who did Raj play with? I'm trying to.
Did he play with Taylor? No, Taylor played with Tommy.
No, lefty, American lefty.
It'll come back. It's all good.
Anyway, it was but that match showed just how, we know Rafa's not a doubles player. We understand that, but so did because, hey, dude, it's Rafa. I want to watch. I remember, was it Labor Cup? Maybe a year or two ago when Vo and Sock were playing against Rafa and Fed. Right?
Yeah.
You love watching that. I mean, these two aren't doubles, and they don't play doubles together. But you watched because, what these guys can do. Now you give relevance to how good these other guys really are in doubles over that. So that's a side tangent to me, but I wanted to mention it because I feel like it needs to be said. Austin,
Krajicek.
It was just something I feel like I wanted to mention because I feel like we've kind of gotten away from, in my opinion, some of the players playing both. And I get it. They need to save themselves for singles, especially. But I also feel like doubles is kind of going down. And these players, especially players like a Madison that are getting a little older, people want to watch and they want to see it, but they want to see a familiar face.
They want to see a familiar face.
And you don't get enough serve and return practice. Play more of a limited schedule, but add more doubles to me. And I think money-wise, I think the slams clearly are gonna be profitable to some of these 500s and whatnot. But I also feel like it's something that the fans want to see, and you can really appreciate how that might extend the career just a little bit longer. So that's just my sense and hope I see it.
The doubles aspect of it, and obviously you have more experience watching, a longer, bank of doubles than I have. But I've noticed in the last, like, let's call it 6 years, you are seeing those players before they pop, right? Like, especially primarily on the women's side. So on the men's side, you don't see it much. But on the women's side, like, you had, Pegula and Golf playing together pretty extensively, up until like last year. And then you had, like, before Arena became
Katie McNally?
Arena. Yeah, and
Right.
Katie, yes, Katie McNally. Well, I was going to mention her another time. Maybe not today either. But how she got direct entry in the Australian Open first round, I have no idea. So, but then also, like, Arena, she used to play with, I believe, Elise Mertens, right?
Yep.
Is that correct? Was it Mertens that she played with? Yeah, I think so. But this is before she became Arena, right? Before she became a player who's going to be in the last, 2 days of the tournament pretty consistently. So, I think it's happening before the people become who they are. I think that's probably part of the problem. And I think the women do a better job of it than the men do, especially at the Grand Slams. And obviously the workload time on court is more of an issue when you're talking about Grand Slams at best of three versus best of three, versus best of five. So, I think it's there. The opportunity is there. The ask is probably there's not really much in it for the top men, if you will.
Sure.
But I think, everyone who's watched a tennis match or been to a tennis tournament knows how exciting doubles is.
Oh my God.
Especially, I think it's more exciting actually on the women's side because they do more stuff.
You see how complete some of their games are.
Yeah, you do more stuff.
What I would say, and to that point, I think it helps them to that end. So again, it was a side tangent, but I feel like for the fanship and for the overall experience, and quite frankly for the game development, I think you don't get those same type of transition balls. You don't get the number of returns. You don't get that level of tempo. I mean, doubles is fast, man. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, one of my old partners and former roommates said, it might as well be a different sport. Just happen to be playing on the same sport.
Doubles is as different from singles as pickleball is from tennis. Like,
100%.
It's a whole different.
I thought that was a great way of encapsulating it. It's such a different game. Everything about it's a bit different, even though obviously it has a lot of similarities. So anyway, with that being said, I feel like the top players we are the losers for not watching them or being able to watch them at some high level. So with that, I know we can move on.
No, well, I think it's important though. You mentioned something about the doubles that one of the benefits for singles players playing doubles is the reps of, one, serving under pressure, two, returning under pressure, right? And some of the big changes or kind of points of emphasis that kept coming up when talking about Madison Keys was like, we'll kind of go in reverse order here. It's like, last year during clay court season, she changed from a hybrid poly gut to straight poly, right?
Straight poly.
To start pulling the governor on some of those big strokes, right? And I remember watching this, probably Madrid, I believe, when this came up, and she was raving about it, like, oh, this is fantastic. I don't know why I didn't do this sooner. Okay, that's one. Two, back in the last year, she starts experimenting with a new racket, right? And that was very obvious. They talked about it a lot during the broadcasts, right? They never mentioned the racket manufacturer, so maybe they haven't worked out the T's and C's yet.
Wilson at the pocket.
Well, yeah, exactly. They haven't worked out the T's and C's of how much we're going to be talking about the Japanese brand.
Wilson's lawyers are sitting there.
Yeah, it's like, no, we can't say it. You can see we can say it, but not say it. But I think the last part, and I want to talk about a little bit about the racket before we change over to the men. But the last part that they talked about a little bit was Madison and Bjorn working extensively on returns of serves between matches. And this is something that you and I talked about in previous episodes. We talked about it ad nauseum at this point, but like, the biggest weapon in the women's game is the return of serve, and the biggest liability being the second serve specifically.
For sure.
So in matches, and like, her last two matches, I would say Madison did those two things extremely well. She served fantastically.
And what happened in the second set? Arena moved inside the court.
Yeah.
Put pressure on the second serve and literally trounced her in the second, to my point. And that was the big adjustment that Madison made in the third. Don't miss as many first serves.
One.
Which is number one, obviously, hello. But it was such a thing to me that it just showed you how lopsided the start can be and how much advantage the serve can be. You couldn't have served better than Madison Keys in that first set. I mean, she was serving big. I mean, corners, out wide, that little slider she has out wide, her flat out wideness. I mean, she hit every target you could hit in
Which
those
was
first
a
service
direct
games.
contrast to how she started the match against Iga, where neither one of them could hold serve for 6 games. Right.
100%. 100%. But shows you that, it's there. It's just the nerves, whatever. And, and especially it gets big up. You kind of have that pressure that I have to serve big against you. Iga, don't get me wrong. Iga, especially the way she jumped on Emma with serves, I mean, that was a clinic in itself with the second serve. But I just feel like those two, for whatever reason, settled into it a little quicker. And it was good to see. It's the second serve, man. The return of serve in general and the second serve return in particular is it is just a gorilla with a flashlight, man. I mean, it is no light at the end of the tunnel. It is a gorilla with a flashlight, and buddy, you're going to get beat up every single time. Don't do it again, So to me, that match was a quintessential women's tennis show of display of this is how you win at the highest level, and really all top levels of women's games. You know what I mean? From junior, college to, even club players, the return will absolutely be a death knell if you allow it to be.
Yep. And then the last thing I want to talk about was they talked a lot about the racket switch, right?
Yep.
And so for those who aren't aware, Madison went from something like a Wilson Ultra, tighter string pattern, more of a control focused racket. I'm using air quotes here, focused racket.
She had played years ago, which I always thought was a terrible racket for her, and I thought the Ultra was a good fit for her. Perhaps Ultra with some poly back in the day. But that Jannick she's got now, man, I know a lot of girls like that Jannick. I mean, the hats off to Jannick for making and they keep getting, ironically, more un-Jannicks in their head size.
It's
right?
getting a little more circular every iteration.
It gets a little more circular every year. I swear to God, back in the Martina days, man, the thing looked like a darn looked like a rectangle with the handle on it. You know what I mean?
It looked like a pickleball paddle,
longer, but 100% right. And it could. I remember Krajicek had Richard Krajicek played.
Oh yeah, like probably
he had that red one.
Yeah.
It looked like a Jannick stole the design of a old school head tournament edge or something. One of them old school round. It was more round than it was square. I think we can all appreciate that.
Yeah.
And in fact, you didn't know it was a Jannick because you're like, but it's not square though. And so anyway, I say it to say, it seems like they've continued to kind of evolve a little bit. They still have that shape, but it is the one that Ben's playing with now, that blue one that a few other players have had. I think your girl.
Jessie uses one.
Jesse's using one
now.
Right.
Madison, Ben, Francis, Tommy, like they're all. Jannick's is. Obviously Naomi,
but a little different one though, because even the one that Wawrinka played with is kind of a.
Oh, that's the old
whitish,
school.
It's like a whitish one. It's like a white or matte gray looking one. All of them are a little different. I don't know Jannick's as well as I know the other sticks. To know that I know the E-Zone and I think the one that they're playing with, but it was just my point is they're starting to have not only a wider range of models, but they got a lot of different players playing with it. I say it to say anybody with a good backhand probably got, on the women's side, probably got to play with the Jannick's. And I always felt it more of a good ground strokers racket. Some of these players are now playing with it who aren't too bad around the net and have pretty good serve. So that to me was always the rub, was ground stroke racket, deep. If you have good groundies, you want the extra reach with Jannick's. The sweet spot moves up a little bit due to the design. And it plays more all court. Needs to play more with the Wilson. That was the old thinking. And obviously, if you're ahead, you're just a pure ball striker. You don't really need much help. You need a ball a racket's going to reward you if you hit in the right spot every time. Clearly, Zverev is one of those classic. I hit the ball pretty clean every time. I don't need anything else from it. I just give it to me and make sure it's the same every time. So it's been neat to kind of see where he's at. And again, I say it to say I think it was a great change for her. She clearly the results are kind of speaking for themselves. And I think that still says a lot for a lot of people. We should always kind of go back and revisit technology from time to time just to see. Just to see. Is there something more it can give me that my current racket isn't? And I think, there's so many rackets coming out all the time now. It's just it's almost like a planned obsolescence, right? They're trying to
absolutely.
How about a new racket?
And I think
you might as well try it.
It's probably I've been a I would say a Babolat guy since probably 2001, 2002, something like that, for my first year in college. And I've always felt good with a Babolat stick in my hand. And I remember back when I was working with you, when I was working for you, and I first got my hands on that Arrow racket, like that was like, oh man, where was this? Where have you been all my life? Now granted, I was in my late 20s or mid late 20s at that point, so I was a different body, a different player at that time, and that felt like that racket felt like it was like made for me. The
Right.
2000.
Well, you left it, you had spin. I mean,
Yeah,
how was it not?
and this is the old Cortex, and it was like the 2010 version. Like that was good stick, good days. And I've kind of stuck with Babolat and specifically that Arrow line, save for a few years when I was working at an academy that was a Wilson Academy. But I bring that up because I did once play with a Wilson and Pro Staff 98L,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried both the regular and the light version. The light version was perfectly balanced. It was the right racket. I had it weighted up at the throat just a little bit, but I felt like I could generate more spin with a light racket
Oh, for sure.
than I could with a racket that was built for spin, like the Pure Arrow.
Spins work, yeah.
Yeah, and so I fast forward to now, and I've been playing with the newer version of the Pure Arrow for about past a year and a half or so. And shout out to my boy Brad Wakely, a friend of ours, friend of the pod. B-Wakes. We'll have to have him on to wax poetic about Babolat and tell us why everyone should be playing with a Babolat racket. But I'm gonna say this: in the last 3 years or so, when I've taken the time to hit with new rackets, those Jannick rackets, they're making a good stick, man. 100%. They're making a good stick. It feels solid on contact, like you feel connected to the ball, but yet you don't feel like you're lugging around the old heavy bat. They do it. They've got something in their magic where you're allowed to carry a lighter stick and it still feels like a player's racket. And I think
to your point, it is very evenly balanced. And I think that's where they weren't always. You know what I mean? They weren't always that way. So yeah, no, shout out to them, and they've also done some nice things. It's happy to see it. Happy to see it. I still kind of go back and forth. I still like head rackets. I still like the Prestige, that Speed. They have now a Speed Tour and a Speed Legend. I think because obviously due to Novak, and I'm telling you, that racket feels good, man. The head speed, good Lord, it's a good racket. And the
Gravity's a nice racket too. The head Gravity's a good racket.
Gravity's a very good one.
Gravity Tour.
Right, that's the heavy one.
The heaviest one is
pros.
Yeah.
Wilson calls them tours and whatever. I think Bab calls them. Are they tour? Are they?
Bab they went away from the heavy moniker,
teams,
but they have the team. The
regular for the normal. I don't think they make many tours anymore. Babalots.
They stopped making it with the
right. But anyway, that whatever they are, I think the heavy ones, whatever they are, I think they're all good sticks. But hats off to all the racket companies to just continue to apply that trade and really make them all better. I felt like Wilson got a little gimmicky there for a little bit. They got a little spin this and open string pattern and blah blah blah. All it did was make you break strings a little faster. In my opinion, you were breaking strings every day. I mean, it was like, oh yeah, notice the span. I'm like, yeah, notice my stringing bell. You know what I mean? But with all that said, I think it was a great switch for her getting back to Madison. Obviously, great match, great tennis. As I said, I think tennis is better for it, and I'd love to move on to the men and speak a little bit about my main man, Sasha Zverev. And
go ahead and speak on it. We're going to transition over. Not even going to take a break. We're just going to keep rolling. I think that was a bit of a clinic tournament from Mr. Jannick Sinner. He was pushed once by Holger. Everything else was pretty straightforward. It reminded me a lot of the U.S. Open, right? Jannick didn't drop a set in the U.S. Open. No, he dropped his opening set, against Mackenzie McDonald in the U.S. Open. But same thing here. He drops one set, maybe two sets in the tournament. It's pretty, it's starting to look pretty surgical outside of his matches against Carlos and Novak to a certain extent, right? On hard court anyways.
I agree. And I would tell you that for some reason, and I'm going to put my asterisk on that comment and not go any further. For some reason, the brother's just playing some, you said surgical. The precision that he has on serve percentage, return depth, And his ability to get out of trouble on that first ball that you run him with are unparalleled. The biggest ball, all the guys have big serves, and the best guys have great serves to spots when they need it. You can't argue enough with Ben Shelton and as far as the youngness, the youth of him and how live his arm is. I want to say, didn't he beat Ben in straights? I mean, he
did.
just
Yeah.
has the ability, and I want to say it was like one in a breaker and then like 2 and 3 or something like that.
It fell apart pretty quick after that.
And Ben's got a cannon. I mean, an absolute Megatron cannon on that side. And you're like, dude, I actually felt that helped him in this match against Zverev because in the opening 2 games, Zverev served pretty well. But I think Jannick was just used to that. He had that ball already, and he had just seen it. Like, dude, you're not going to serve much bigger than Ben. I handle Ben's serve. I think the thing that I want to speak to more than anything, Sinner has depth on his return that is unparalleled, Alvin. When I tell you his ball is probably within the back 6 to 8 feet of the baseline on a return. So he's taking your 130, 135 mile an hour serve to a corner and hitting the ball back within the back 6 to 8 feet of the court. That is phenomenal. It's not just that he makes the return. It's that he hits the ball back so deep to you. And mind you, he's back 8 feet himself off the baseline. It's not like he's Novak taking the ball early, absorbing your pace and redirecting.
Right.
He is back hitting it. And I feel like there's a lot to be said for a lot of his return. His return's traveling 80 some odd feet. And he's giving it an absolute rip. And now you're in a sense where if you don't have great footwork and great anticipation, you're not looking for your ball to come back with that kind of speed. And therefore, that alone either rushes your first strike or it makes you short hop it, which doesn't get the same penetration. So there, to me, is why he's breaking. Years ago, when Novak was so good at it, he was taking your return so early, you didn't have time. Years before that, it was Andre Agassi, who would just rifle a return kind of from where he was. But Agassi he also missed quite a few returns for taking such a big cut at the ball. Jannick has kind of morphed the two. He said, look, I'm going to go back bigger. I'm going to rip through. I'm not going to roll. Nadal would roll and go heavy and reset.
Yeah, back up, roll, reset. Yep.
He's found a sweet spot to be just far back enough to rip, but not have to roll, and be not so far up on the court to not give himself time, but he can still rip the ball. And that to me is the one piece that no one's really talking about, in my opinion, tactically, that he is so much better than everybody else. You just can't unless you ace or hit a service winner, you just can't hold as easy as you would like. And over the course of a service game or a set, you have that eerie Jaws music in the back of your mind. Here he comes. You know what I mean? Every time, and know it's harder and harder to hold serve.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 things you mentioned there that I noticed. One I noticed, and the one you brought up, he does sometimes, he will back up. He did back up against Ben. He didn't back up so much against Alexander, but he did back up against Ben. But then he does this thing where he'll hit that return, especially on the ad side, right? He'll take that return deep cross court, and then he comes right back up to the baseline, and he hits that first ball almost like it's as opposed to hitting a good first ball from the baseline and then like striking midcourt, he's just doing the same thing, but 6 feet back. So like he'll hit that return. And then when he comes up to that next ball, that what you would consider to be neutral ball right on the baseline, he tags that thing like an offensive ball, almost like saw one that he hit almost as like a lift and land from the baseline. It's like, oh, we're building from here now. Okay.
And closing the door on any building you as a server might have.
And that kind of backs into my other point where Alexander kind of has no chance in this matchup, the anticipation part. Like a lot of the guys, because the game is so fast on the men's side right now, aren't attuned to, in my opinion, hitting that first serve and then looking to strike on that first ball, because generally it's coming back pretty big, pretty quick. And there are opportunities, but sometimes they're not ready for them. I'll say some players, specifically Alexander, he's behind the baseline waiting on that first ball off of his own first serve that he's hitting 130 at a 70% clip. It's like, that's the big difference from him in the lip service he gave about like, I need to be more aggressive. I need to step up. And it's like, well, you need to do it like right there. There's an intention there, and that he's not he's not bringing of like from the serve, I am then going to take that next ball and I'm not going to back off this baseline.
Yep. I will add, first of all, two great points you mentioned there. Specifically for Alexander, his whole approach to the game to me is a little more of a war of attrition. He wants to get in that backhand rally. He wants to hit 8 balls. He wants to kind of wrong foot you a few times. He doesn't mind hurting you on the move to his forehand, and he counters well in the backhand. He doesn't really want to take the backhand line as often. He doesn't want to be as aggressive.
Yeah.
The problem with that is, against Jannick, if you give him too many chances, he will be aggressive if you don't. And you don't like that matchup if he's being the aggressor, especially on your service game. I feel like his changes, like that he's made on the serve, his serve looks great, by the way. So hats off to Misha and his dad and the camp for making some of those changes. I feel like he's only going to get better, as you mentioned at the outset, continue to develop. He's got that to develop. You could tell there were some points where he was going line on the backhand. He just wasn't as comfortable trying it that early. But should he continue, he'll get that ball. He's got a great backhand. It's just a matter of him making himself do it. I feel like the two pieces that he needs the most from a coaching perspective, addressing his court position better and just being willing to go for those, the inside out, inside in, or the backhand cross to the forehand, or the backhand cross, backhand on the rise, and then let's see what I got. Maybe backhand line, maybe go one more backhand roll cross and break your ankle to come on the volley. But he is not looking for that exchange. I call it combos in a lot in tennis. You mentioned neutral ball. You and I are going neutral to neutral on a certain shot. I take my first ball big, be it big cross, be it big on the rise, be it inside out. The combo is really a 2-shot situation where you hit one to get one. And if I connect on the second, that makes a combo. If I don't, it's just a good shot, and I may have to neutral back. I may have to slice back, depending on how good your ball is on me. I can't necessarily forecast what I'm going to get back. There's a good chance I'll get one if I do it right.
Right.
But the combo is dependent more on the bow than the comb, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He hits a lot of combs with rarely a good bow behind it until he's ready. And I saw it in the center match. He likes to go back in the back. He did it a lot with Novak even in that first set that was almost an hour and a half long. He just wants to stay cross. And I feel like that's a good thing in some ways and a bad thing in some ways, especially if lack of depth creeps in, which unfortunately it tends to do. So the combo for me, for Zverev, for his next chunk of this year, is can I get the ball in that back 9 feet more often, ideally the back 6 feet, and more importantly, can I look to strike a little sooner? I don't have to necessarily bring my margin any worse, just keep the depth and move in more. What Sinner did, and you mentioned this, he hit the return from 6 to 8 feet back, and his next ball is within 2 or 3 feet of the baseline on ball 2. So any window of you having to run him is now gone. And should you run him, he's on the move. He's not on the run. Big difference. On the run, 6 to 8 feet and 3 to 5 feet out wide of the alley. On the move, 2 to 3 feet baseline, maybe within the alleys on that next ball on the run. And on the move is comfortable, especially for Sinner. On the run, he can still handle that too occasionally. But when you have him on the move, you might be in worse shape than he is.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is like, whether he, with that backhand, like ways to create more depth, right? And then what do you do off of that ball? Those are all kind of variations on the same thing, right? A good way to create more depth is to not make the shot so damn long, right? Why don't you come up a little bit, right? You got to be able to take that ball off the rise, and that will then give you some more depth on that backhand cross. Like, and then number 2, it's like, okay, well, what happens after that? You can go inside in, you can build inside out from there. I know he doesn't like to, but you can go backhand line. But again, you don't want to be picking that ball up and going backhand line. You want to be driving through that ball going backhand line, which again means you got to come up, which all comes back to the anticipation part, right? You got to be looking for it, building for it. And, that's kind of it's a very thin line between the winner's circle and clapping from the back. And I think the thing that is, it's hard to argue with his results. The man is 2 in the world. He has, he did final the French Open. He did, final the Australian Open. But just because the line is thin doesn't mean that the line isn't there.
Yeah.
There's a clear line between those who can win Grand Slams, those who are willing to take it. And in this space we are in right now, that is a 3-man circle, and one man is limping his way out. Right? And that doesn't mean that there's room for 3, that Alexander's just going to assume the position. He's going to need to force his way in with a little bit of intention. And,
100%.
We've talked about it before, say it again, these things aren't given to anyone. I do think he can win one. I just think he's going to need to full on sell out and commit to what it takes. Yeah, what it takes.
Taking that ball early, and he should put on his backcourt, on his practice court, wherever in Germany or wherever their home base side is, put that Melbourne superimposed, and every time he's on it, there should be he should have a shot spot that is telling him, oh, hang on, I'm on it again, and make him stay within that, and put a bunch of steel pokers and pikes and pails all pointing at him if he backs up at all, and just have Misha back there poking at him. Move forward, Sasha, move forward, and have him hitting that ball. I'm telling you, the kid is fun to watch. Quick side note, I love his defense of Novak after that match, when some of the crowd, not all, was starting to boo a little bit. Novak's easy to boo. We all know you either love him or you hate him.
Yeah.
But he was so quick to come to his friend and fellow competitor's defense. Sasha, to me, has never been in my opinion, one of the louder guys on tour. And for him to make that stand, as humble as he is, as kind of almost self-deferring as he is, I was so impressed. Everybody else came out in the press later, from McEnroe to Martina to whoever. Oh yeah, it was bad. But he did it right then
on the spot
with the mic, courtside. I mean, in the moment, I was so impressed. I had so much. My stock, I always like Sasha, but at that moment, he went through the thermometer on in my opinion, and spoke to the crowd about, if anybody has given their life to this, it's Novak. This guy has won tournaments hurt. If he can't go, he can't go. Trust me. And I just felt like he put all of him aside and spoke to the crowd, and really, I thought that exchange with him and Courier was a great one. But more importantly, I felt like he really was a professional there, and in a nice way. He wasn't chiding them, but he was quick to point out, hey, you guys are a little bit out of place on that one. And I thought for another pro who's a rival, friendship or not, rival, to speak that way to the crowd when he just won, he's still a little disappointed we didn't get to go, right? And then I just felt like I wanted to mention that, because I thought that needed to be said, how awesome that was for him, for the sport. And some of these guys, you appreciate how good of people they are. And just you could just tell there was some good home training there. It was just a great comment in the moment that you couldn't have crafted. He didn't have a day or two to think about his response on social media.
Yeah.
It was right then, right there. It was pure. It was honest. It was well delivered and timely. But most importantly, it was real. And I just wanted to make that point. Hats off to you, Sasha Zverev. That was a great, great response. While still being respectful to the crowd, was very quick to point out, hey guys, no, we can't do that. This is one of the greats of the game.
Yeah.
So it was big.
Yeah. And I thought this was a good time to maybe share my own personal funny Sasha Zverev story. But I'm not going to. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it. It's a good one. I think about this story often. I occasionally will text my boy Mahir Kumar to laugh about this story, but I'm not going to share it today. No, I'm not.
You're dangling the cliffhanger. I love it.
We're gonna leave it there. We're gonna put a pin in it. We're gonna bid farewell to my favorite city in the world, Melbourne, Australia. I love that place. No place I'd rather be in January of any year. And it was fun to kind of share it through this lens this year. This was a lot of fun, and I think we'll get better with how we look at tournaments and whatnot moving forward. But it also allows us some space between this one and the next one to kind of talk about the stuff in tennis that we want to talk about. Right? We got some cool stuff coming up for the people in the next few weeks and months that I'm excited about. I know you're excited about as well. But yeah, thank you all for rocking with us. Let us know what you think. And until next time, Torrey, always a
Alvin,
pleasure.
always a pleasure, brother. Always a pleasure. Look forward to it.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Peace.
Hey.